Hi Pop Tarts, I am going to be filming an episode of Tea and Tarot today. Tea and Tarot is back. Yes, it has been long requested and long anticipated by some of you, which is really lovely. And I'm sorry I got off track with it, but I'm thinking that from now on I'm going to endeavour to put it out once a week, get a little bit of consistency going again. And I really enjoyed doing it, but I kind of got sidetracked with so many other things, and so I'm back on board. I'm back on board with Tea and Tarot, in which, if you are new to this game, I will drink tea and I will talk about tarot because that is what I do best. For today's tea, I'm just having an ordinary breakfast blend. It is the morning and I'm filming this really spontaneously and really off the cuff, so I just told Danny to go downstairs and make me some tea because not only do I need tea to function in the morning, but also it's tea and tarot, and you know, we can't have one without the other. For this episode I thought I would talk about accountability and taking ownership. This is something that comes up for me in my work in spiritual counselling. It's something that comes up for me in my personal life. It's something that I see people doing, not doing, trying to do, trying to release old habits, kind of centering around that topic. So I thought today I would select some cards to help us get clear on what tarot has to say about that. First of all, let's do some definitions for accountability and for taking ownership. Accountability is when you're willing to answer for the outcomes of the choices that you've made and the way that you've behaved in situations, positive or negative. Taking ownership is claiming your part in having made something happen, or your part in making something happen, whether that's your part in your own success or your part in an accident or mistake that's kind of occurred, something that's gone wrong, your part in the breakdown of something rather than in the creation of something. So again, that can be positive and negative, and it kind of moves along on a spectrum in that way. Although taking ownership and being accountable is always a positive thing, no matter what the situation. Recognising your part in something, the effort that you have to bring to something in order to make it fly, and recognising your part in when something has gone wrong or when something is not quite risen in the oven, that's always positive, and it can never go to a negative place. The less accountability and ownership you take over the things that are going on in your life, normally the less you can kind of function and have mastery over your emotions and have healthy relationships, etc. And I'm sure this is something that you've all seen in your own lives, so I guess I don't need to preach to the choir. The first card I chose was the moon, because I quite often feel like the moon is about really being honest with other people, but most importantly being honest with yourself about what exactly is going on in a situation and exactly what your behaviour is bringing to the situation. The moon is also about perceptions. It's about your perception, it's about other people's perceptions, and it's about the notion that instead of believing in one overarching truth, you sometimes have to realise that your perception of what's going on may be skewed or may be biased, or you might not necessarily be seeing everything that is kind of going on in the situation. You might not be witnessing all of its complexity because you don't have that 360 angle on it. The moon is quite often about things being partially illuminated, and sometimes our sense of what's going on is partially illuminated, and sometimes our sense of self is partially illuminated. So when it comes to being accountable, I think the moon is really about being honest about the situation that's going on, being honest about your part in it, sitting down and being really honest about where your biases are and where you might need to actually start to see things from another perspective, and also being honest about where you may need to be sorry, where you may need to apologise. Apologising when you really feel that you should, and when you really feel that it's right, and when you see your own error, it can really bring a lot of grace and diplomacy and release of tension to a situation. So quite often I think the moon can be about that in relation to accountability too. I also think the moon is really about witnessing your own illusions, just being really honest with yourself about where you might be seeing the situation in a flawed way, and actually just kind of bringing your ownership of that perspective to the table so that you can see things from a more balanced perspective. And I think that when it comes to accountability and taking ownership of your success, taking ownership of the relationships in your life and how you're choosing to deal with them, being really honest with yourself and recognising your own mistakes and your own flawed ways of seeing things is really the first step. If you can't do that, then it's going to be very difficult for you to take accountability and take ownership over those things. The next card that I chose was the Chariot. I chose this card principally because I think that the figure in the Chariot knows where he's going. He knows what he wants. He is on a trajectory. That trajectory is conscious. It's not something that he needs to really put a lot of cognitive function into. It's not something that he's kind of delaying over. It's not something he's indecisive about. No, he is aware of what the goal is and he is moving diligently and confidently towards it. When it comes to taking accountability for our choices and taking ownership of our own journey towards success, I think it's really important to know what we think success is, to have our own version of success, which is very important and can involve, you know, some kind of deconditioning process, because we all kind of come into adulthood with certain unconscious complexes surrounding the idea of success. You know, we think of success according to our teachers or according to our parents or according to society. So the first thing to do is to break those things down and to actually understand and crystallise what you think success is for you. And the next thing to do is then to understand what you need to do to get there. So once you have your vision of success, you can understand what the steps are to get there and the small kind of manageable bite-sized goals that you need to reach every week or every month in order to move closer towards your version of success or to design the life that you want. When you take accountability for what you need to do to move towards success, it's much more difficult to do things in an unconscious way. For example, if you are trying to build an online business and you're trying to make it thrive, but actually in your spare time, rather than kind of networking or doing your brand design or making plans for things, you are sitting there and spending like 8 hours on a computer game. When you know that you want to be accountable for the choices that you make, and when you understand that you are in the driver's seat of your own life and you're responsible for your success, it's much harder to do things like that in an unconscious way, because you know that you're only going to have yourself to blame if at the end of it you don't reach the place that you want to be. And so really being accountable is about being conscious. It's about realising that you choose what you do with your time. You get to choose how you spend your energy. And remember, this is something that I tell my clients a lot. Energy is like a daily cash allowance, okay? You get it and it's finite. Once it's gone, it's gone. So you need to decide where to spend that energy. Where do you spend that money? And there are certain ways you can spend it that are responsible and that I would call an investment of time. And then there are other ways you can spend it that are irresponsible, and that's what we would call a waste of time. So when you think about your energy like a cash allowance and you think about the fact that it's finite and you get to choose what you do with it, accountability really comes in there as well, because it's only you that can spend that energetic kind of allowance, you know. And if you spend it unwisely, then you need to be accountable for that. You need to be willing to own up to the consequences of that and kind of take ownership of those consequences. So I think that's something I'd say about the Chariot, is that this guy here has decided to invest. He's decided to invest that daily energetic cash allowance, and you know, it might be time in your own life and in your own endeavours to decide now if you have chosen to do the same thing. Have you chosen to invest that precious time, that precious energy, or have you chosen to waste it? I chose the Nine of Wands because quite often I feel that the figure in the Nine of Wands is struggling to reach out and ask for some help, or he's struggling to really accept and express how much he has to do and how much he is alarmed by the degree of accountability that he feels that he needs to take. What I would say is, don't suffer in silence. If you are really stressed by the amount of commitment that you have, or by the amount that you feel that everything is kind of weighing down on you, I think it's important to express that and go through that with somebody. I think it's important to take a look at your priorities and decide which priorities are actually obviously primary and which priorities clearly need to be secondary, but maybe you're seeing them as kind of key priorities. Maybe you're seeing them as primary, but really they can go onto the back burner. Quite a lot of the time when we look at our to-do list, we can't really see what should be done first. It's very difficult to decide what's the most important thing to do, and a lot of people struggle with that, and they fall into analysis paralysis and they just can't quite get that groove in the wood. They sit there looking at everything they have to do, but they really can't decide what should be first and what should be of greater importance and what should have the biggest energy investment. I would say sit down and take a look at your priorities again. Take a look at your duties, your obligations, your desires, your endeavours, your pursuits, and just decide which are primary right now at this point in your life and which is secondary. What can afford to go onto the back burner, and who might you need to be honest with about that? You know, who might you need to actually assert yourself with and say, you know what, I can't get to that right now, I have other things I need to do. I also think the Nine of Wands can be a little bit about blame gaming. It can be about kind of looking at everything that's on your plate and thinking, woe is me, and kind of looking outside of yourself for reasons for this stress, or kind of things that you can direct your stress towards. It's really important to kind of make sure that your attention doesn't get directed at somebody that doesn't deserve it. And it's also really important to recognise that if you're struggling to be assertive, that is something that you need to be accountable for, and it isn't anybody else's fault. You know, you need to be bringing those tools and those skills and those mindsets really into your conscious awareness so you can learn how to be more assertive. I chose the Seven of Wands because I really think that this card can have quite a lot of wisdom in it with regard to overcommitment. If you're really serious about being accountable for, you know, everything that you do and say, and the things that you're involved with and your achievements, and if you're serious about taking ownership of your own life, then I would say it's really important now to take a look at whether or not you're overcommitting. Because sometimes, you know, the list of the things that you want to do and that you have to achieve and that you have to get done becomes so mammoth, so big, that it actually turns into a form of self-sabotage all on its own. Because you kind of know deep down that that big list of things you've got to get around to is not realistic and is not going to get done. You're almost kind of setting yourself up for failure because you're not being realistic about the fact that you are human, you are not magnanimous, and you cannot be all things to all people at all times. So I would really urge you now to work out where the overcommitments might be in your own life, if at all, and actually work to redress those balances. Because I think sometimes we can really overcommit ourselves, and then we can really kind of hate on ourselves and berate ourselves, criticise ourselves for not getting everything done. When really, if you look at the amount that you put onto your own plate, then you could be honest with yourself about the fact that that was never going to get done. It was never going to get done, you know, because you need to sleep and you need to eat and you need to do other things. You're not a robot. So really at this point I would urge you to let the Seven of Wands take you on a little bit of a journey to try and establish where you're attempting to be robotic and superhuman in your own life, and cut yourself some slack. Because quite a lot of the time we can really, really hate on ourselves and loathe ourselves for not getting everything done, when in reality, you know, what we were trying to get done was just impossible. The other thing I'd say in relation to the Seven of Wands is take a look at whereabouts you might be trying to take accountability for other people and for what they're doing with their lives and for what, you know, they're doing to move towards success, etc. When you take accountability, it's important to take accountability for your part and for the energy that you are spending and where you're spending it and what you're choosing to do. Where when we talk about boundaries, what we really mean is we're setting up boundaries between our own accountability and what we are willing to take ownership of, and then what actually falls into somebody else's realm, you know, what they should take accountability for, what they should take ownership of. And sometimes when boundaries are weak, we can actually sometimes realise in a moment of pure radical acceptance that we are taking ownership and accountability for other people's shit, for their business, for what they should be doing. And it happens with parents, with children, it happens with friends, it happens when you kind of enable somebody or, you know, allow somebody to continue with their addictive behaviour or their negative thinking patterns, whatever it is. If you've realised that actually your boundaries are weak and you've been taking accountability for somebody else's business, for something that they should be getting done, or even if you are taking ownership of their failure and kind of, you know, feeling like that's on you, it's really time to start assessing that now and bringing that stuff out to the light. And sometimes shadow work is involved with this. Sometimes we realise we've been doing that, you know, since the year dot, and that actually these messages have come through from childhood and we really need to decondition. So, you know, that exploration can go to some deep places, but I would urge you, if you're listening to me now and you know you're overcommitting, or you know that you're taking accountability for other people, taking responsibility for what they should really be taking responsibility for, it's time for that assessment, you know, and really allow that exploration to go deep if it needs to. The Two of Pentacles is just a final little message about choice, weighing up the pros and cons of choices and also taking a look at the consequences of your choices. This can be really difficult, and this is quite often why a lot of people come for a tarot reading. Okay, that's what it's about. It's about, I have a choice to make, there's a fork in the road, there are two directions or maybe more, and I really want to get clear on what my level of accountability is going to be in either direction. What are the consequences going to be? Because I want to take ownership of this choice. And so I really need to think about the pros and cons, you know, the long-term progression and what would be best for me and what would be best for those I love. So, you know, quite often that is why people come for a reading, because they've kind of reached this time in their lives. They are this figure, they are the Two of Pentacles, and they're kind of juggling those two pentacles and kind of wondering, you know, do I get on this ship? Do I stay on land? What's going to happen? And how can I get clear on my reasons for the decision I'm going to make? When you make a decision from an empowered place where you recognise that you can be accountable for what you decide and you can take ownership of what happens as a result of what you decide, you can take ownership of the choices that you make, and you know that you are permitted and entitled to make them, that's where the juice really is, that's where the gold really is, that's where the treasure is. If you're at a time in your life right now where you feel like you're not entitled to make decisions about your own life, you're not entitled to make key decisions about the trajectory that you want to take, the life that you want to design, the business that you want to have, the way you want to parent your children, anything like that, then I really think that the Two of Pentacles might be calling you at this time to reassess. Because I think making choices from that empowered place where you are comfortable to take ownership, you are comfortable to be accountable for the decision, that's really good. But if you feel like you're not entitled to do that, then it needs to begin there. There are a great many people who are scared to make a decision because they're scared to take ownership of the consequences. And that's really what this Tea and Tarot episode has been about, you know, that really if you paralyse yourself with the fear of taking ownership of the decision that you make, then the decision will be made for you. Things will change, that is the nature of life, but if you can't decide in an empowered way which direction to take, then you'll kind of become like tumbleweed and the wind will blow you where it wants you to go. So really it's about being clear on the choice that you want to make, and if you're not clear on your entitlement to take that power into your hands and make that choice, then you will be tumbleweed. Life will bat you about here, there and everywhere, but it won't necessarily be in alignment with what's in your heart. You won't get moved into those areas that are really peachy for you, that you really want to explore. So I think the Two of Pentacles can actually be about the level of empowerment, the level of entitlement that you feel to make the choice that you want to make. So I think that's another area of exploration, you know, whether or not you fear ownership for the consequences of your actions, that's another thing. But really at the centre point of it, ask yourself if you feel entitled to make decisions, if you feel like you can take your life into your hands and choose something for yourself without people pleasing, without worrying about other people's expectations, without worrying that you might be wrong. Do you feel empowered? Do you feel that you can take that choice and own it and harness it and utilise it and make it and see what comes from it? Because that's the joy. That's really where you're in that position of the magician. Oh, I did a rhyme. That position of the magician where you really feel like your will can be channeled into something and you can see what comes of it. And that's really where the treasure is in life. So I would urge you to think about that too. And this has been Tea and Tarot, and there will be many more episodes to come. I have lots and lots of plans for things that I want to talk about and cards that I want to get into in relation to different themes. So I'm really excited about that. If you are watching this in December, then my Yule and Christmas options are now available over on Etsy. You can click the link below to get over there. You can also go to thefourqueens.com and check out what I'm blogging about and check out what's going on with me. You can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Facebook. Again, the links are below. And I'm really excited to get into the Yule and Christmas readings this year. I actually love doing readings around this time because I feel the energies are just so ripe for release and receive. And I really feel like that comes up for a lot of people at this point in the year. And I wanted to mention one particular purchase option. It's the 2015 Kickstart reading. Last year I did a 2014 Kickstart reading, which was the same kind of vibe. It was a 3-card reading focusing on the first 3 months of the new year. So you can really like crystallise your intentions and get clear on where you want to go. That reading is back. It's now obviously called 2015 Kickstart reading, and that might be one for any of you who really like to plan ahead and are really feeling like you want to harness the energies of this movement into the new year. That could be one for you, so I'll link that specifically below too. And much love, many thanks for watching, and as always, blessed be.